In this video, we're going to build our first Python class. Now, the class, I'm going to kind of give it away up front, is named the Princess class. And the reason I tell you that is because I had this hilarious scenario in one of my classes where one of my students just couldn't get her head around classes. And she came in after school one day and really wanted to fully understand the difference between classes and objects. And she was really kind of overthinking it. So I said to her, think of something that you like to think about that has nothing to do with computer science. Because object-oriented programming is about modeling the real world. So I don't care what it is, I don't care how silly it is, tell me something you like to think about that has nothing to do with computer science. And she said, well, I always wanted to be a Disney princess. And I thought, that's perfect. So we built a class called Princess. And with that class, we were able to discover how a class defines what is basically a custom data type. And so in this video, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to build the very same Princess class. And then in the next video, we're going to talk about how to instantiate that class into an object so that we can actually use it as a custom data type. So take a look at how we build a princess. In this video, we're going to talk about how to build your first class in Python. Now, a class, as you will have seen through my lectures on object-oriented programming, a class is a recipe for an object. Another way of saying it is a class is a definition of your own unique data type. So we make variables of the type of whatever we name our class, which means we can't use a class without instantiating it into becoming an object. So we never refer to the class when we're operating on an object. We refer to the object instantiation of that class. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about how to build a class. And we're going to use a class that I've been using as an example for the last 5 years. It's based on some work I did with one of my first students in object-oriented coding. She was having trouble getting her head around what a class, the difference between a class and an object. And so I said, well, tell me something you like to think about that has nothing to do with computer science. And she said, well, I always wanted to be a Disney princess. And she actually tried out to be a Disney princess. She really was, she could have been one. And so it was kind of funny, and we got a kick out of it, and we had fun building the princess class. And so we're going to build that class for you again today so that you can see how it's done. And then in the next video, we're going to use the princess class and we're going to create some objects of that class. And I think between these two videos, it'll really give you a good running jump into Python. Now, the first thing we need to understand is that a class definition is in its own file. One class per file, please. Okay? So we're going to do this very, very structured and very, very properly. And what that means is we don't need any of this. Because in a class definition, we're not running a program. We don't need a main loop. We don't need preprocessor directives because I am defining a class. I'm still going to have my header. And in here, you see I've typed princess class. And it is, the file is princess.py. Notice in the file name, I did not use any capitalization. Classes themselves, however, are capitalized by convention. That way, if you see, in this case, princess, if it's a capital P, you know it's referring to the class definition. If it's a little p, you know it's dealing with the file, and we're going to see that in the next video when we start to use it. Now, the way we define it is by simply saying, here comes a class, and we're going to give it a name, princess, open, close, colon. And now anything I do underneath this is going to be part of the definition of the class. Now, classes have two types of things in them. They have fields and they have methods. Fields are the data elements of the class, and methods are the things that a class can do. And there's several special case methods for classes that we'll talk about as we go. Now, in Python, there's not a whole lot of information security built into classes. There's really not real encapsulation where the class can protect its members the way you would think it would and where you can in other languages like Java and C#, okay, and even C++. So encapsulation is not very strong in Python. That's beyond this course, but we're going to go ahead and build those special case methods like the constructors and the getters and setters anyway, so that we can talk about this as we go. But the first thing we're going to do is create two fields. We're going to keep the princess class very simple, and we're going to say that the first thing that we need to know about a princess class is the princess name. Okay, and notice we are, because this is a field of the class, we're going to camel case the name, princess name, and we're just going to set it to blank for now. And then we're going to say num frogs kissed in looking for the prince, and we're going to set that to 0. Okay, now the first thing that we do in a class is we build a constructor. Now, a constructor is where we are typically going to initialize our variables. I'm doing it here just as reference because in Python you really can't define a data type because Python does it for you. So what I'm doing here is I'm forcing the data type to be a string and an integer ahead of time. But what we're going to do is we're going to build a constructor, which is where we would initialize the fields of the class and give them their first values. So we do that by saying def. Now, it's kind of weird in Python, and you'll see this when you get into Java in the next class, how normally a constructor is named after the class. So in Java, C#, the name of the constructor would be princess. But in Python, it's underscore underscore init underscore underscore. Okay, and then we're going to put some parameters in here. But basically, you only get one constructor in Python, and it's called init. All right, so that's just the way the language goes. And in a class definition, we have to give as one of the parameters to every method we do the word self, because Python is interpreted. So it's going to put these objects on the heap somewhere, and it needs to know where it put them. So every method we do has to have a pointer to itself, which Python will maintain when it runs the program. So every method in a class definition in Python has the word self in the beginning. I will never use it again because when I call it, I don't need to call it with some memory address. That's handled by Python. So anything after self is information that I want passed in. Now I'm going to make the rule for my class princess that when you create a princess, you must give her a name and a number of frogs kissed. So I'm going to accept the parameter name and num frogs. Now I'm purposely naming one of them the same. Well, it's not really the same. So name and num frogs. So name, I'm going to assign, when you pass this value in, I'm going to assign it to this field. And num frogs, when you pass it in, I'm going to assign to this field. So what I do is when I'm done this, I hit colon. And now I'm going to say self.princessName. Notice the IntelliSense is finding it for me, is equal to name. And self.numfrogskiss. And I keep wanting to do that where I want to hit enter because in other IDEs, it will basically type that in for you. It's not working here. So num frogs kissed equals num frogs. So what this has done is when I create a princess, which we will do in the next video, I'm going to give it a name and a number of frogs, and it's going to take that name and put it in this field, and it's going to take the number of frogs and put it in that field. So I will store the values that are passed in the fields of the class, which is exactly what you want to do. Now, in real world coding, you don't just let anyone change the names of your objects without validating what they've typed in, because they may be trying to hack your code and inject malicious names or numbers of frogs or whatever, or credit card numbers or ID. They may be trying to blow up your code. So we don't just let anybody reach into our fields and get those values without validating them. So the convention that has been established is a series of methods called getters and setters. And in languages and classes that have good encapsulation, you have what's called access modifiers that determine whether or not you can even get at these methods in a class. Unfortunately, they're all public in Python, but we're still going to write the getters and setters so that you go through the drill. So we're going to write the getters first, which will return the value of these. Okay? The value of these. Okay? So it will no longer have these values because we will have established it with the constructor. So it will give us the values that are currently stored in here. So if we change it and then call the getter, we should see the updated values. All right, so the first one we're going to define is get princess name. Okay, and we need self, and that's all we need because we are returning a value that we already know as a field of the class. Now, something I want to point out. These methods are camel case, so it starts little p, big N, little n, big K. When we add the word get to the front of it, the p becomes big with the n. Make sure you get your spelling right of your getters and setters. It can be a little confusing at first, but methods and variables in a class are all camel cased. Okay, so the first word's lowercase, then every word thereafter in the name is capitalized. So when we do the getter, getters are functions. So in the real world, the first thing we would do is find out, is the user logged in? Are they valid? Do they have access to this information? And if all of that is true, then we would return the value of the princess name. We're not going to do that, but we're going to comment validation would go here so that we're reminded of that. And then we're just going to say return self dot princess name. Okay? Self.princess name. So that is a getter for princess name. Now let's define one. Get num frogs kissed. We need self. And we'll notice the get is small, so now the n is big. Again, careful with our naming and our notations. Okay. So again, validation would go here. And then we're going to say return self dot get. I wonder if tab does that. Oh, it's tab. There we go. I love the updates to this IDE. So tab will fill it in for me. That's outstanding. Couldn't imagine there wasn't a way to do that. All right. Def get num frogs kissed. Validation and then return. Not the method. My bad. Get num frog kissed. The field. And this is just num frogs kissed. I picked the wrong thing. In the IntelliSense, I was so excited. There we go. Dot num frogs kissed. All right. Notice the self. When I say self, it's going to find the correct object and return it. Okay, that's why we use self. So self.numFrogKiss means mine, this one here. All right, so those are getters. These are functions. Why? Because they return a value. They both return a value. They are getters. What we're saying is, please get me the field store there. Get me the field, store there. That's why these are called get and then the name of the field. All right. Now, if I want to change those values, I need what's called a setter. Okay. And with a setter, it's a procedure because it's just going to do something. And I need to pass in the value that I want it to change to. All right. So I'm going to say def set princess name. And I'm going to have self, but I'm going to have a new name. So I'm going to call this name to set. All right. So that it's really kind of brutally obvious what I'm doing. All right. So the name that I want to set, I need to pass in. All right. Now, again, validation goes here, right? Because I want to make sure that you're allowed to change the name of that princess, right? I don't want just anybody being able to do that. All right. So validation would go there. And I just say self dot princess name. Now I can hit tab equals name to set. Okay. And that's it. So now let's do the one for, let's do a setter for Numfrog's Kissed. I'm going to define it. Set Numfrog's Kissed. I need self as a pointer. And then we're going to say number kissed. And again, validation goes here. And then self dot num frogs kissed equals number kissed. Okay. Now we have, for this class, we have a constructor and we have two getters and two setters. Now, we're going to have a lot more methods in typical classes that we use. But one of the ones that I always insist that my students create is what I call a dump method, or a method that displays the entire state of the class. Okay? So for that, I'm going to say def print princess, and I'm going to need self, and I'm just going to call this a princess report. So I'm going to say print princess report, and then I'm going to say print, and I'm going to do this all in one sentence. So I'm going to say princess comma has kissed one frogs period dot format, and into format I just need to pass the two fields that I want to put. So the 0, I'm obviously referring to the princess name, right? So that's going to be self dot. Now I could just put self dot princess name, okay? But to be safe, I'm going to go through my getter so that I'm actually validating the user that calls this as well. So I'm going to say self dot get princess name method, comma, okay, wait, make sure I get this right. Self princess name, yeah, comma, self dot get num frogs kissed. Okay, put a space there so I can check all my parentheses. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yep, those are good. All right, so that is a method. Oh, and look, I'm missing a colon. That's why that's barking at me right there. Invalid syntax. So that should go away. Now, what doesn't it like here? Ah, see, it tells me princess name. I've got a capital A somewhere that I don't need. So let's make sure that's good. And it's important to clear all of these X's because it's going to be the next video where we use this. So let's review this real quick, and then we'll be able to get to the next video where we show you how to use this princess class. So we've defined princess with 2 fields. We've given it a constructor. We've created 2 getters, 2 setters, and basically a dump method that gives us a princess report, which tells us that the princess with this name has kissed this many frogs. Pretty simple, but it's a basic class in Python. So now we know how to build a princess. And obviously we can build a class that's named after anything else in the real world that we want to model. So in the next video, as I promised at the top, we're going to create an object out of that princess class. We're going to bring it into an actual program, instantiate that class as an object, and then manipulate that object in memory. Okay? It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll see you on the other side.